Okay, today is November 30th, 2019, and we're here with our brand new council member, Jose Medrano. Jose, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, first of all, tell us when you were born and where you were born.
In 1969, I was born in Tecate, Baja California, Mexico.
And your parents?
My parents, my mother was from Tecate, also born in Tecate. My father was from Jalisco, from Guadalajara in Mexico.
And how many siblings did you have?
I have three siblings, a sister and two brothers.
Irma?
Yes. You know my sister.
Okay.
Yes. You may also know her as, what else? Irene?
Irene?
Yes.
And you have a Rob?
I have a Rob and I have a Carlos.
Okay. So tell us a little bit about your childhood and growing up in Tecate.
Looking back on it, I guess it was one of a storied childhood, somewhat anyway. Just running around like any other kid. Times were different back then, but I don't know how different, because at that point in time I couldn't have told you what it was like anywhere else. But typically it was just growing up as a kid with my cousins and everybody else.
So what is your fondest memory as a child?
Being with my parents, and granted, being this time of year, we just had Thanksgiving, but Christmas was always a big thing for us, and those were the best growing up.
What made it so special? What made Christmas so special?
Being a kid, it was seeing a tree. Gifts under the tree was the biggest thing, and then I knew that we'd see our cousins later as well. It was big, because we'd always get to see my dad's side of the family on Christmas Day.
Did you guys have any special traditions back then?
What I would call the normal traditions. I mean, tamales at Christmas was definitely one. My mom would make tamales. We'd see our family. We'd be off of school, which was great. And when we were here, it was being out in the neighborhood riding bikes with a bunch of our other friends from morning until night, right around Christmas time, because we had 2 weeks of vacation.
Is the Medrano family a big family back there in Tecate? Cousins?
Not the Medrano family. My mother's side of the family, the Rebelin family, is they're considered pioneers of the city, well known in the city. So yes, that side of the family is.
So tell us a little bit about your household. What did your mom do? What did your dad do? What was?
My mom was a stay-at-home mom. She probably had the toughest job in the world, having to put up with us for it, and run the household, for lack of a better term. Again, things were different back then, and we were growing up in a Mexican household. My father worked blue collar. He was a machinist, and it was one income, and he put food on the table for us.
Well, you say things were different back then. In what way?
Unlike it is now. I mean, for instance, in simpler terms for us, you could go out and play out in the street. We didn't have electronics. We didn't have phones, handheld phones, electronics that we could play with. It was you wake up in the morning, and if you didn't have any chores, or if you had your chores, you were done with your chores, you went outside and you played all day. You played out in the street. I vividly remember playing football out on the street on the asphalt, between two curbs. Two curbs were your sideline. That doesn't happen anymore. You don't see that anymore.
How about schooling? Where did you go to school back in Tecate?
Actually, here was where I went to school. We started, I think it was kindergarten. I actually went here in the city of Norwalk. I was 5 or 6 years old at the time.
So when did your family come to the United States?
When I was, oh man, I was a young kid. My brothers and sisters were already well into their early years. Yeah.
And when you came to the U.S., you went to Norwalk? Is that where you ended up from?
Originally Gardena,
okay.
City of Gardena. Spent a few years there. When I was, let me see, I think moved to Norwalk in the early 70s, and grew up in Norwalk for almost 20-something years.
Oh, really?
Yes.
So how were those years growing up in Norwalk?
They were great.
Yeah.
Again, I just described them. Playing out in the street.
Yeah.
I mean, that was where my childhood and my adolescence were. Went to school there, of course. Went to Catholic school, St. Linus Catholic School, for 8 years, and then went to high school over in Santa Fe Springs at St. Paul High School, private school.
One thing I've noticed is you, your brothers, and your sister are very, very close.
Yes.
Oh, tell me a little bit about that.
I attribute that to my mother and father, and to the big families that we had. It was customary for us. I mean, as kids and even as adults now, to go to family gatherings. It was expected of us as kids, of course, but now as adults, it's not so much expected, and we do it when we can. But it's a familial bond that's been there since we were born, and well before our time as well. That is what our parents instilled in us, a sense of family. I mean, I can remember from being kids, and whether you know it or not, my mother's side of the family has a family reunion once a year in August at my uncle's ranch, and that's been going on for over 40 years now. So a sense of family is very, very important for us.
Where was all your schooling that you went here in Norwalk? If you want to go there.
St. Linus Catholic
Linus
School.
Okay.
First 8 years.
Okay.
We started out in kindergarten first. It
Okay,
was
yeah.
a public school. It was Hargett,
Mm-hmm.
Cora Hargett School, and that was kindergarten. And we went to Catholic school thereafter for 8 years at St. Linus, and then 4 years at St. Paul High School here in Santa Fe Springs.
So in high school, what were some of the activities that you were involved in, and what did you kind of do back then?
Wasn't involved in any sports actually, but extracurricular activities through the school. Dabbled a little bit sometimes in soccer whenever I could. Did not play soccer for the school. Had a lot of friends, and realistically, when I was a sophomore in high school, I was working locally in Norwalk, so didn't have much time for it, I guess, and would have loved to have done it, but. You know what? I worked. I worked
So what was
at a
your
young
first
age.
job then?
Oh, my first job. I worked for the L.A. Herald Examiner.
Okay.
I used to deliver the newspaper.
Really?
I was 11 years old. Yes, and I used to deliver the paper in Norwalk. I had a series of routes near my house. Used to get on my BMX bike. Used to tie the newspaper holders that were canvas bags that you tie onto the bike, and I'd go out and deliver to about 40 to 50 homes.
Wow.
Every day. Yeah. Great job. You can't do that anymore.
No, yeah.
Those are
right?
the things you can't
It was
do.
online.
Matter of fact, yeah, not only online, but we as paper boys, we used to go collect at the end of every month. We used to go knocking on doors and collect for the newspaper from customers.
Yeah.
And I remember we used to, I think it started out at like $5.25, maybe if not less, for the month.
Uh-huh.
And I remember it being, I think, as high as like $6.75 at one time.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, but I was 11 years old when I started that. Prior to that, whether I was 11 or 10, I don't remember. But I also delivered a local newspaper. It was called the Herald American.
Okay.
It was a southeast cities newspaper that was local to the city of Norwalk, and I think the city of Cerritos maybe. But I delivered that first. Then I went to the Herald Examiner, which was a bigger paying job and nice.
What's your fondest memory of high school?
I think my friends,
Yeah.
getting together with friends on the weekends, was probably it. Yeah. Aside from going to school every day, but at the time you don't realize it. But those are probably some of the better memories, being around campus, things of that nature.
Now, unfortunately, I understand your parents died fairly young.
Yes.
When did that happen, and when did that occur?
My father died in 2000, just at the beginning of the new year. A few days in the new year, actually, he had a heart attack. He had issues with his heart. It was his third heart attack, and unfortunately, that did him in. He was 60 years old when he passed away.
Oh, wow.
Way too young. And my mother, she died in 2010. She had Alzheimer's. She was diagnosed with dementia 4 or 5 years before that, about 5 years after my father died. We always say she died of a broken heart,
Yeah.
you know, in certain ways. But but she succumbed to Alzheimer's.
What do you think is the most important values you've learned from your parents?
Oh, family.
Yeah.
Family's one of them. integrity. I mean, those, I think those two things are probably some of the most important.
Would you say they had the biggest influence in your life, your parents?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Jose, when did you decide to go into law enforcement?
I had always considered it while I was in college, but never really took it too serious. I thought, no, I'm going to school. I need to finish that first before I even consider it. So, lack of a better term, it was probably about 26, 27 years ago that I considered it in the early 90s. And when I really took it serious was after I had graduated college and thought, you know what, I was bored with what I was doing. I had a degree and I was working at UPS at the time, actually. I worked for UPS for almost 6 years. And it wasn't fulfilling. Mm-hmm. But that made me consider law enforcement.
What college did you go to?
I went to Cal State Fullerton,
Mm-hmm.
and graduated from Fullerton with a degree in business.
So run by the process of you entering law enforcement. Where did you go? Or the academy? Run through that whole process if you can for me.
Lengthy process at the time. One that took, I think, the better part of a year and a half. Originally, I applied to various departments. The LA Sheriff, Long Beach City, LAPD, Beverly Hills, Pasadena Police Department, Anaheim. I applied to multiple agencies. And of course they do backgrounds on you and things of that nature. Well, when I'd applied for Pasadena, that one was the quickest actually, because that took less than 6 months.
Okay.
And they took my application, they interviewed me. I had to take a test, of course, a written test, and a physical agility, which I passed, and then an oral. And it went from there, and they wanted to hire me. They said, can you start the academy on this date? And I said, absolutely.
And the academy was, where did you take?
Went to Rio Hondo Police Academy, up at Rio Hondo College. The city of Pasadena had sponsored my academy.
Share with me about your early years with the Pasadena Police Department.
Yeah, good times is what I could say. I loved it, and you know, and I still love it. Driving around in a black and white was the best thing. I remember my very, very first day out on patrol with my training officer.
Yeah.
My training officer was a man by the name of Shea Durham. Great guy, tough as nails.
Yeah.
And they put me with him because they didn't think I was going to make it through training. And if anybody was going to wash me out, it was going to be him.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, great guy, very knowledgeable. I'll tell you, my first night on patrol, I remember going in a foot pursuit.
Oh, really?
Yeah, oh yeah. Yeah, that was no joke. And what was funny about it, or ironic about it was within a week and a half of actually graduating from the academy. And at the academy, I had remember pulling my something in my quadricep in my leg. Couldn't run very fast, during that time because I was somewhat injured. But I get in a foot pursuit that night, and end up coordinating, catching someone, whatever it was for. I don't even remember what it was for. But ironic is that you get in a foot pursuit on your first night working.
And what year was that you?
1996.
1996.
Yes.
Yeah. Now it seems like your family comes from a big law enforcement background. Well,
we do actually. We do. How that happened, I don't know.
So I was going to ask you, how did that happen?
Well, you know what? Maybe it was one of my uncles was a police officer. One of my dad's brothers. He was a police officer over at Cal State Los Angeles on campus there. He was a police officer. Yeah. We'd hear stories here and there about it, which I think intrigued our interest. But I'm going to rewind a little bit actually, because for the city of Norwalk, while I was working at UPS, I was actually a volunteer public safety officer. Where my brother Rob, he was a full-time public safety officer there. I volunteered, and that also kind of got the ball rolling in law enforcement. That was back in 1990, late '94, that I did that. So,
does it ever concern you to be in law enforcement? Do you ever worry? What?
Yes and no.
Yeah.
But I don't dwell on it. I've always thought that if I dwelled on it, maybe I wouldn't want to do it. I don't know. I mean, I've taken many a days and many a times to think about what we do as police officers, what I've done, or when you're in the moment. But it's satisfying. What can I tell you? It's public service, and it is very satisfying. Can it be dangerous? Absolutely, but I don't dwell on it. Try not to.
How did you end up going to the district attorney's office?
About 15 years ago, I lateraled over to the DA's office as an investigator. I was at the city of Pasadena at the time, and my last assignment was actually over at the Orange County Sheriff's Academy. I was a tactical officer there, running recruits and the academy classes. I, along with another cadre of police officers and sheriff's deputies. Because I was a training officer with the city of Pasadena, they had sent me there on loan. Long and short of it was that I had 3 daughters within a span of 3.5 years, almost 4 years. All 3 of my daughters were born. And I started looking at it, wow, if I go back, work patrol and I promote and things of that nature, I'm going to be working weekends and nights, and I'm going to be back to that schedule again. The DA's office had an opportunity as an investigator where you rarely work nights, weekends, things of that nature, but you're still doing investigations. They have their own law enforcement arm, so that appealed to me, and I wasn't going to take a big cut in pay, which was nice. So I looked into it and saw what they did, and I said, yeah, this could work, and I did, and I don't regret it. Best move I could have made, especially for my family.
What's the most rewarding part of being involved in law enforcement for you?
Being able to help others. Bottom line. I can answer that one quick any day of the week. Being able to help.
And what's the most challenging?
Not being able to help others. When you see what we're going through here today, present day, when you see what's going out on the street. I mean, you have drug addicts, you have people that are stealing and robbing other people, and you work with victims, and you talk to victims of these crimes. It's hard. It's not easy.
What's the most challenging part? I mean, you're out there in the streets and doing these investigations, and you're exposed to some pretty tough situations.
Yes.
How do you deal with that stuff?
Well, you know what? You compartmentalize, I think. Everything in your life has an area or a section. I think I do. I think I compartmentalize. If anything else, like I said before, you deal with these victims and you see what they've gone through, and the exploitation that some have faced. Whatever it is, you just kind of put it in the back of your mind and buckle up your bootstraps, so to speak, and get to work and try not to let it affect you.
So you are married. How long have you been married?
21 years.
21 years to...
Excuse me. Hold on a minute. Is it 20? It's 21 this year.
Okay.
Yes.
21 years to Allie.
Yes, Allie, my wife.
And where did you meet her?
Her and I. You ready for this one?
I'm ready.
All right. Well, as you know, my wife is an assistant U.S. attorney.
Okay.
She's a lawyer. We met on jury duty before I became a police officer.
You were both serving on jury duty?
We were both serving on jury duty.
Okay.
Yes, this was back in 1995.
Were you actually like on a case, jury duty, or just?
Well, I eventually was put on a case. She was not.
Okay.
So that was back then when you had to report for jury duty for 2 weeks.
So you met in the jury room, or
yes,
where, like in the
jury room. Yes, in the big jury.
They have
pool.
all the big pool of people.
Yes, like a big old.
So what happened there?
Well, we met, James.
You were found guilty of stealing her heart,
right? Or she stole mine.
Yeah, right.
Right, absolutely. Yeah, no. We're in the jury room, and through the course of 2 weeks, you're being called in and out of of courtrooms to assess our quote unquote competency of being jurors for certain cases, and we got to talking, and the next thing you know, we're going out to have margaritas on Cinco de Mayo, because it was during that time in '95 that we were jurors. Yeah, so it was the rest is history. Yeah, it took off from there.
So when and where did you propose to Allie?
We're getting personal.
All right,
man. It was November 1st of 1997. Okay. We took a trip up to San Francisco. This is after about 2.5 years after I'd met her. Okay. We went up to see the Dallas Cowboys, my favorite football team, play the San Francisco 49ers at the then Candlestick Park. and I had already had it all figured out. I had already bought a ring, and we went to one of her favorite restaurants. I believe it was the Cliff House in San Francisco, and proposed there.
Wow.
Yeah.
And then when you were first married, where did you guys live?
Originally, we lived in West Los Angeles,
Uh-huh.
in the area of Wilshire and Bundy.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so we lived there for about a year, give or take. Yeah.
And then the children came.
Yes, but first we moved out here to La Habra
Okay.
before the children came.
Okay.
But
So
yeah,
what year did you move to La Habra?
it was 21 years ago. It was in 1998.
1998.
Yes, we moved in La
Same,
Habra.
same area where you're at today?
Yes, that home.
Okay.
That was that's been our first and only home.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you move there. So what's your first thought of La Habra when you come into La Habra? And why La Habra?
Well, quite honestly, in that area we live in now,
Yeah.
it's known as the Macy area.
Yeah, yeah.
My brothers and I, we had rented a house prior to me getting married back in 1996, I believe. I was still going out with my wife. We rented a house in the East Whittier area, which is about a mile from the Macy area, and lived there for about a year. So we were three cops living in the house.
Uh-huh.
Great time. But we love the area. Anytime my wife would be there, it's a great area. Love the trees, love the tranquility. It was nice and quiet, still is. And when we were living in West LA, we had a choice to make. We were either going to continue living in West LA or in those areas, or maybe move out this way. And my wife, was like, "Yeah, let's move out that way." It was great area, nice and quiet. Good schools, things of that nature. We got one of our friends, a realtor, to look at homes for us.
Yeah.
And she showed us 3 homes that day, and this was the winner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what were those early years like here in La Habra for you, 21 years ago? How was La Habra back then?
It's funny because
No traffic?
No traffic. And there was nobody listening. That's the problem. The homeless issue was not here, I'll tell you that. But in all seriousness, La Habra, to a sense, because we didn't have kids,
Yeah.
didn't register so far as what I'd be doing in the future.
Yeah.
But it was a nice place to be. We had Tommy's back then, and what's now over at the Northgate property, and other areas. Some restaurants, Adelitas, things of that nature. Where we'd go to eat from time to time. But we were all over the place, not only in La Habra as far as patronizing restaurants and businesses and things of that nature. But that was it.
So, raising a family, tell me a little bit about the youth sports and all that goes on with raising a family, and what were you involved in back then?
Well, that was trial by fire, so to speak, because my oldest daughter Isabella at the time was 5 years old, and my wife and I had always said, we're going to get our kids involved in sports or in some extracurricular activity that they would take to. And what I knew was sports. I knew growing up playing soccer, and I took my daughter to AYSO during sign-ups and signed her up. The funny thing, or the ironic thing about that was, if you were to look back on that day, you'd think this young lady right here wearing a princess dress, a Disney princess dress, slippers, and a boa, was probably not going to take to the sport for too long.
Uh-huh.
And you look and you fast forward now 12, 13 years later, now that she's 18, she's a phenomenal soccer player. But that's what started the process for me, being engaged in youth sports. A year later, about a year and a half later, my middle daughter wanted to play because her big sister played, and then a couple of years after that, my youngest daughter wanted to play because her sisters played. That was soccer, and then that evolved into softball because we wanted them to have something to do in the spring months. We had soccer in the fall, and then we did softball in the spring, And I got involved with both sports. I coached both, not because I knew what I was doing, I'll tell you that. It was to stay involved. I mean, plain and simple, it was just so they could have the best possible experience and not have an overly intrusive adult in their life, i.e. A coach that we wouldn't have known. Yeah. And my intentions were not to coach early on.
Yeah.
I got kind of roped into it by my daughter's first coach.
What do your daughters mean to you?
Oh, I love them. They're my life.
Yeah.
Life doesn't go on without them. They're the best thing. The best thing.
What's the most important value you want to instill in your daughters?
Well, I think the same that were instilled in us: family, integrity, and hard work. Yeah.
What's the most challenging part of being a father?
That there's no instruction booklet on how to be a father, and I've got 3 girls. That hopefully I'm doing the right thing.
And the most rewarding?
Oh, seeing them grow up to become young women, and they're doing so well right now. I mean, both academically, and of course in sports, but in life, they're growing up to be great young women. And one of them's almost taller than me.
What's your most fondest memory with your family, Allie, and your daughters?
Whew. I don't know if there's just one.
Yeah.
I can't say that there's just one. Maybe the fondest memory for me involving my family is seeing my daughters be born.
Mm-hmm.
Individually, yeah. Collectively, anytime we get to spend together. Yeah.
Okay. Then the area where you lived was actually part of a county island.
Yes.
And then you got annexed in.
Correct.
Where did the decision come to run for city council?
It came about, well, this was, we're in 2019. In 2018, a friend of ours had suggested I run. We were at a graduation party actually for a good friend of ours, their daughter, and we were talking at the table. Oh, you'd be perfect to run. I said, why? Well, because you tell it like it is, and you have a way with people. You served on the softball board at La Habra, mm-hmm. and people respected you, and you told it like it was, and you didn't let anybody get away with anything. I said, yeah, but that doesn't mean I'd make a good council person. Mm-hmm. You're talking a small entity, and the city is a huge entity. No, you should run. And I had given it some thought years prior, something of a passing thought, really. And having had discussed it with my wife before, wouldn't it be great, to serve, like on a city council or something? And yeah, something we would laugh at. But it was summer of 2018, 2018, that the idea, early summer, that the idea was born. I said, I'm going to give it a shot. Mm-hmm. And of course, I put my paperwork in and went to work.
What was the decision behind wanting to run?
Wanting to help our community.
Mm-hmm.
There was, of course, as you had said, we were being annexed. We had just been annexed into the city. We were part of a county island since we had lived in La Habra for the better part of 19 plus years at that time. We weren't on our 20-year mark yet. We only knew one thing, and it was something of a passing thing or a passing thought, is that we never had to really consciously think of who we were being governed by, because we were being governed by the county, mm-hmm. And we only knew one way. And that was only us that had been there 19 plus years. There had been residents that had been there for decades that didn't know what it was like to be a part of a city per se, and the governing body of the city, and what that was going to entail.
So what year was that you decided to run for city council?
2019.
2019 election. No,
yes.
The election would have been
2018.
2018 was the election.
Yes.
Election year, November 2018.
Yes.
Would have been the election.
Correct.
Year. And you decided to enter the race, and you're
yes.
going to go up against 2 incumbents.
Yes.
And what were your thoughts going against 2 incumbents?
People thought I was crazy.
Okay.
people thought I was crazy, and my thought was this, and I'll be serious. My thought was that I was going to win a spot. I didn't know any better.
Okay.
I'm not a politician per se, and not that that's a bad thing. It's not, but it's a calling of sorts. I thought that I could do it, but I never thought in my mind that I was going to lose. But again, I didn't know any better. What the sentiment was as far as you can't do that. You're running against two incumbents. Are you kidding? They've been in office for the longest time. One of them, you, the mayor, Mr. La Habra, and I knew then, seeing the big picture, I thought with and not just because you're here today, you were going to be tough to beat. Yeah.
So you enter the campaign, you enter the race, and you get a lot of momentum.
Yes.
And how did that momentum build? Tell me, run by that campaign.
Well, I think a lot of it was me going door to door.
Yeah.
In our city, knocking on doors and putting myself out there, letting people know who I was. I think another part of that was that I had some knowledge of the community on a different scale through the sports part of it, youth sports, families that knew me, and I think word spread that way. And of course, social media had a big role to play in it as well.
What was the most challenging part of running a campaign?
There were a few challenging parts. Getting out there, getting people to help you, knock on doors. Money. You need money to run a campaign, and that wasn't something that.
Well,
I had
ironically, you spend very little money.
Yes, I did.
Uh-huh.
I did something I'm very proud of looking back at that, because again, that was part of what I didn't know.
Yeah.
And until I got into the campaign. But what helped me was grassroots.
Yeah.
I had a lot of good people helping me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're on election night.
Yes.
And where are you at on election night?
We are at a local pizza place.
Yeah. Blackjacks.
Blackjacks.
Right.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. We wanted to gather with my family and the whole family, my brothers and sisters and a few aunts and uncles.
So you're there, and early results come in probably about 8:15 at night after the polls close, and then bam, it hits, and you're number 2 on there.
Yeah.
What's your feeling then?
I could do this. I mean, it was my feeling all along. I just couldn't. I can't quantify it for you as to what magnitude.
Yeah.
But my brother looked at me and he goes, this isn't supposed to happen. I go, what do you mean? He goes, first count, I would have expected you to be down, in third place and probably, in dire straits. So really, he goes, yeah. He was just being honest, and he was always honest with me.
Yeah.
But again, that was part of my not knowing or being naive, to the fact. But in the back of my mind, I was like, no, I'm not going to lose this. I'm not going to lose it. And the thought never came into my mind.
And it seemed like a kind of a family affair, because your brothers and sisters were very involved. Your daughters were really involved. Your daughters actually kind of crunched the numbers. And what was she saying then?
She was saying after that first count, my oldest daughter was saying, "Dad, you're going to win."
Yeah.
And I was like, "What do you mean?" She goes, "Yeah." She goes, "You're going to win." And then when the second count, she goes, "Dad, you're going to win." I go, "How do you know I'm going to win?" I felt I was going to win, but I couldn't quantify it. She goes, "No." She goes, the numbers that are coming in, and this is not supposed to happen for somebody who's coming in and running against two incumbents. And I said, well, that's what everybody says it, but I was challenging her, run the numbers. And she goes, no, I'm running the numbers. She goes, by the time the third count came in, she goes, they're not going to catch you. She goes, you're going to win.
So once you realize you're in,
yes,
what's that feeling like?
Oh man, it's like no other. When it comes when it comes to city council things, it was like, okay, I like I said, I'm not gonna lie, I had a feeling that I could win. In my mind, I was gonna win, but that feeling of somebody telling you is like, wow, and then people shaking you and going, you just did the impossible locally, right? And I'm like, okay, sure, I mean, it was elation. It was a good feeling, more so, and you hear me say it to this day, and even back then, because I did not run a negative campaign. that's what made it more special.
And that is something I want to talk about a little bit
Mm-hmm.
about. You know, you stayed in the straight and narrow, and it was not your typical campaign for all of us involved. I was involved in that, and
Right.
there was no mudslinging, and we all kept on. And how does that make you feel?
It makes me feel real good.
Yeah.
Because at that time, and still to a degree, I had two lives, so to speak. My professional life as a police officer, and then my home life as a father, and now as a councilman, contributing to my community. Part of it was this, is that I knew the negativity that was out there in my professional life, being
Mm-hmm.
a police officer, and what people would say and what people would do in reference. I've seen people in dire straits. I've seen the worst of the worst society has to offer. And I didn't want that to bleed over into what I was doing here, honestly. There was no room for it. I didn't want to do that because you guys, and I mean you guys back then as city council people, were doing your best you could for our city, I'm sure. You still are. But you have served. There are people that haven't done what you've done, to that point.
So you vote gets certified.
Yes,
You get sworn in December of that year.
yes.
After you take the oath of office, and your whole family's here, got your daughters there, your wife there, brothers, sisters, big crowd there. How does it make you feel once you realize you're in? You take the oath of office.
It was good. I wanted to cry.
Yeah.
Couldn't, of course.
Yeah.
But it was a good feeling. Yeah. You think about a lot of the things you've done in life, a lot of the hard work you've put in, but I thought about my parents, and thought about my parents. And,
What do you think your parents would think today?
That's they'd be proud.
Yeah.
They'd be proud. Yeah. That's they'd be proud. Absolutely. Yeah.
So you enter office and the work begins.
Yep.
What's been the most challenging part so far?
Whew. People are tough. Our residents are tough. They demand a lot. But it's a good feeling because they come to you with issues, with problems. Things I've dealt with before in my professional life, so to speak, on a different level.
Yeah.
But it's been challenging, but it's been rewarding. I love it. It's nice. It's nice to be able to help people on a different level.
Yeah.
It really is. Yeah.
So what do you hope to accomplish? Your first year, looking out several years from now, what does it look like for Jose Medrano? What do you want to accomplish here?
Here in the city, as bad as it may seem, to keep the status quo, to continue our city in that bedroom community feel, to continue that. I mean, because we're growing. I mean, not only our city, I understand. I mean, our state is growing. And then there's demands put upon us as a city council by the state. I don't want to see our city get overrun. I like the bedroom community feel that our city has, and I think an overwhelming majority of the residents feel the same way. They don't want to see us get too big, and that's what I want. I want my kids to be able to come back and want to live in La Habra. And I don't know if I've told you this one. My older daughter, a few years ago, before she graduated high school, we were talking one day at I don't know if it was at the dinner table in front of the TV, and I don't know how the subject came up, but she said, "Yeah, me and Miranda, one of her best friends, who lives across the street, and Haley, who lives next door, lifelong friends for her. We're talking the other day, and we want to come back and live here in our neighborhood." Mm-hmm. And I thought about that, and I said, "Man, that's powerful." And that was before I decided to run.
Yeah.
But that was one of the things I considered when I ran as well, is to keep our neighborhoods not only safe, but to keep them to where our kids want to come back and live in these neighborhoods. I think that's important.
Do you have a motto in life?
I don't know if I do. Just try to do the right thing.
Yeah.
Try to do the right thing, and make my parents proud, make my family proud,
Looking back over your life, would you do anything different?
I don't think so. I don't think so, because I'll tell you the reason for that, because you think about that, and people have asked me that before. I don't think I'd do anything different, because any one thing could change what I have right now. No way. What
does La Habra mean to you?
Love it. Behind my family, I love this place. I don't have any plans on going anywhere anytime soon. Yeah. As far as moving, and I want to see the city succeed.
When people ask you about La Habra, what do you tell them?
It's a small little city, and it's far from any freeway, and it's beautiful. Love that about our city.
How would Jose Medrano like to be remembered?
Somebody that cared, somebody that served. Pretty much it. You know, he served us well, not only our city but society. You know, yeah.
Fill in the blank. Jose Medrano is
a good person. Good person.